Lesson 5. What are the issues of atmospheric pollution in London? The City of London has been found to be one of the most polluted places in Europe. Under European Union rules, Britain is allowed no more than 35 bad air days in the whole of the year. London is now facing court cases and unlimited fines by Europe if it exceeds 35 days in a year. Many places in central London are often close to the limits defining a bad air day. Poor air quality is considered one of the biggest public health issues facing the United Kingdom. According to the report of the House of Commons Environmental Audit Committee, evidence was presented that air pollution could be contributing to 50,000 deaths in the UK a year. A study commissioned by Boris Johnson during his time as Mayor of London calculated that more than 4,500 deaths were caused by poor air quality in the city every year. The high levels of pollution that were recorded way back in December 1952 was made worse by the increase in road traffic at the time. Today, pollution from road traffic, and particularly from diesel fumes, is the most significant cause of London's poor air quality. The two pollutants of most concern are microscopic airborne particles known as PM10 and nitrogen dioxide, a toxic gas. Particulate matter, PM10, is made up of tiny, non-gaseous particles suspended in the air. Those smaller than 10 micrometers are referred to as PM10s. Within this fraction particle, with a diameter of 2.5 micrometers or less, pose the greatest threat to human health. Nitrogen dioxide is a gas that forms other air pollutants like PM10 and ozone. It is caused by road traffic and other processes that involve the combustion of fossil fuels. It is associated with the increased mortality. Nitrogen dioxide also causes acid rain, which has adverse effects on human health as well as destroying vegetation and crops. So what's the history of air pollution in London? London has suffered poor air quality for many years. It all started early in December 1952. There was a thick coal fog known as the Great Smog that descended over London. Because of a period of cold weather, Londoners started to burn more coal than usual. The smoke created by this burning coal was trapped by an inversion layer formed by the dense mass of cold air. Concentrations of coal smoke in particular and other pollutants built up dramatically. The problem was worsening by the usage of low-quality, high-sulfur coal by Londoners in their homes. This usage of this said coal was because the government was aiming to increase export levels of higher quality coal due to the country's tenuous post-war economic situation. Driving during the time of the Great Smog was impossible because of the thick fog or smog. The extreme reduction in visibility was accompanied by an increase in criminal activity, as well as transportation delays and a virtual shutdown of the city. These fogs caused large numbers of deaths from respiratory and cardiovascular problems. On the fourth day of the fog, at least 4,000 people had died as a direct result of the weather, which affected the health of a further 100,000 individuals. The Great Smog lasted for 5 days. This event led to changes in practices and regulations, including the development of the Clean Air Act in 1956. Laws that regulate the air pollution in London. The Clean Air Act in 1956 was an Act of Parliament of the United Kingdom passed in response to London's Great Smog of 1952. It was in effect until 1964 and sponsored by the Ministry of Housing and Local Government in England and the Department of Health for Scotland. The Act introduced some measures to reduce air pollution, especially by introducing smoke control areas in some towns and cities in which only smokelessness fuels could be burnt. By shifting homes' sources of heat towards cleaner coals, electricity and gas, it reduced the amount of smoke pollution and sulfur dioxide from household fires. Reinforcing these changes, the Act also included measures to relocate power stations away from cities and for the height of some chimneys to be increased. The Clean Air Act in 1968 made it an offence to emit dark smoke from chimneys unless it was due to cold start and smoke cleared when hot, due to the unforeseen failure or use of unsuitable fuels, where no suitable fuel is available and fuel used was considered to be to the least unsuitable. Dark smoke is defined as more smoke darker than the shade 2 on the Rangomon chart. This act led to the definition of limits for emissions of grit and dust from furnaces, and it defined requirements such as components to be fitted to new furnaces to prevent such emissions. Regulations also provided a framework for control of the height and position of chimneys. The Act enabled the creation of smoke control areas and introduced controls on acquisition and sale of unauthorised fuel in such areas. The Clean Air Act in 1993 controls domestic and industrial smoke. This legislation, along with changes in fuel usage over the past 30 years, have helped the UK to meet air quality standards for sulphur dioxide. This Act also seeks to consolidate the Clean Air Acts of 1956 and 1968 and certain related enactments, which, with amendments to give effect to recommendations of the Law Commission and the Scottish Law Commission. The first part of the Act is concerned with dark smoke and the prohibition of dark smoke from chimneys, industrial and trade premises, and the meaning of dark smoke. The second part establishes the requirement that any new furnaces must, as far as is practical, be smokeless. There are also imposed limits on the emission of grit and dust from furnaces, requirements for arrestment plants for non-domestic furnaces, emission monitoring provisions, and chimney height regulations to ensure efficient and adequate dispersion of emissions. The third part is concerned with the creation of smoke control areas and the prohibition of the emission of smoke in controlled areas. Part 4 establishes control procedures for certain types of air pollution, regulations about motor fuels, the sulfur content of oil, fuels, furnaces and engines, and cable burning. And lastly, Part 5 provides information on air pollution via research and publicity, details on how to obtain information, notices requiring information, and appeal processes. These acts are an important milestone in the development of a legal framework to protect the environment.